Well, what is the fallout of another extended break for pupils? The Education Department says it will be tracking how many children and teachers do not return to school over the coming weeks and months. According to the latest figures from the NIDS CRAM survey, close to 1 million children have now dropped out of school. That is triple pre-pandemic levels and the highest level in 20 years. So what's being done to get those children back into a classroom? Let's talk to Rahima Essop, Communications Head of the Zero Dropout Campaign. Rahima, good evening to you. Thank you for joining us. Do you expect that number to spike once again after this extended break?
Well, it all depends on whether we can track and trace learners who are absent and who have been absent from school. It's imperative that we ramp up reintegration plans as schools are now reopening. So we need to make sure that we get our learners back into class, because the longer that they are away from school, there's a greater likelihood that they won't return. We have seen that attendance rates are the lowest in 20 years, according to new data surfaced by the NIDS CRAM survey. We also know that an additional 500,000 learners have dropped out of school since the start of the pandemic. And as you mentioned, that means that the dropout has tripled compared to pre-pandemic conditions.
And as your campaign, in fact, says, 40% of pupils in grade 1 will not make it to matric. So what are the primary reasons then for children dropping out of school permanently?
Well, dropout comes at the end of a process of disengagement in which a learner is pushed or pulled away from school due to factors in their home, school, or community environment. Now, the pandemic and lockdown have exacerbated the disruptions that would typically cause a learner to drop out. We've seen disruptions in the household with increased hunger and unemployment. We know that some learners have lost their primary caregivers, and that will cause obviously mental distress and a need for them to get psychosocial support. There have been community disruptions as a result of the unrest that we've seen in KZN and Gauteng, and learners, as a result of experiencing that level of trauma, will also need psychosocial when they return to school to ensure that there is that smooth reintegration back into the classroom.
We know the Department of Education has said that they are really concerned about the dropout levels, but are there actions reflecting that concern?
Well, we know that the Department of Basic Education, for the first time this year, has spoken out about dropout in Parliament and in various spaces. But it's important that we have a coordinated response to dropout as civil society and as the Department of Basic Education. There needs to be that coordinated response, because dropout is everyone's problem. It's not just an individual problem or a household problem. Everyone is affected. When a learner drops out, that person loses their chance to access the workspace. So they miss out on opportunities to learn, to earn, and to contribute to social and economic life, and that contributes to a high unemployment rate. So we know that dropout is everyone's problem, so we need a coordinated response. And there are things that that households can do as well as schools. It's not just government's problem alone. We all need to work together. For instance, to get learners back to school, because we know that the attendance rate is really low, schools can leverage the structures that currently exist in communities like churches and street committees to urge learners to return to school and to trace those that are unaccounted for. Schools can use community volunteers to track absent learners by going door to door. And we know that this is effective. We've seen some of our implementing partners that work in various communities do that, where they leverage community volunteers to go door to door to track absent learners and find out and ascertain the reasons why they haven't returned to school. And that will allow them to then divert them into different programs to assist them either academically or with psychosocial support, and to bring them back into the classrooms. Schools should also have a dedicated team to monitor the reintegration efforts, and this is really important as measures that need to be taken right now, because we are in the midst of a crisis. we need to get the learners back into the classroom, and it's not just schools that can do this. They need to work with communities.
That coordinated approach that you talk about, that is so crucially important. Rahima, thank you so much for your time. Rahima Essop there from the Zero Dropout Campaign. It's a national campaign, and their aim is to halve the school dropout rate by 2030. Well, an alleged instigator of the recent unrest which ravaged